right. Another episode of Side Note, a podcast dedicated to underground dance music and all things related, with me, your host, Nick. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce to you all Theo, long-time DJ in the Southern California rave scene for over 20 years now. I am pushing 40, and I remember, going to raves as a teenager, DJ'd by this guy, and just having an amazing time. I feel like back then, there were all kinds of, even still, there are all kinds of underground raves, although I don't go to all ages stuff anymore. But back then, if you saw an advertisement for an all ages event and Theo was on the lineup, you knew there would be a good time. So again, real pleasure to have you here, man, and welcome.
Appreciate that.
So, before we started, you were just telling me about, your weekend.
Yes.
Sounds like, so you were playing last night in Santa Barbara with DJ Dan.
Yes. I played at it's called EOS Lounge. It's right in downtown Santa Barbara. It's pretty much the go-to spot for, kind of real good dance music.
Gotcha.
Where you're not getting bombarded with, hip hop requests.
Right.
Like that.
It's like a smaller college town, so there's probably only a few venues, right, that kind of do the real house and techno.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think there's anything in IV, which is right next to campus, because where UCSB is, a comparison to downtown Santa Barbara, still like a 15-minute drive. So really, the stuff in downtown Santa Barbara caters to, I guess, the young. Some of the college kids, of course, come down into downtown, but it really kind of focuses mainly on the people that probably are either born and raised in Santa Barbara or the people who have actually moved to Santa Barbara to get out of LA.
Right. It's people it's kind of locals who are a little starved for house and techno.
Absolutely. Don't want to drive.
Yeah,
to
they don't
LA.
want to drive to LA, and that's the spot. And then tonight you're playing a boat party.
Yeah, it's called Boat to Off the Grid. It's Off the Grid is these desert parties that are happening out in like Apple Valley, Victorville area. And the next one is Labor Day weekend. And in between their events, they're doing all kind of different fun stuff. So they're doing a boat party this afternoon in Newport Harbor. And that's why I'm down here. I'm going to go DJ that. And then they have an after party that's also in Orange County.
Wow. So, I mean, after all these years, you've been in the scene for 20 plus years.
Almost 30. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is some serious kind of veteran status. I guess for that whole time, were there ever periods, I guess outside of Corona, where you weren't getting regular gigs, or has it been kind of a steady flow for that many years?
Luckily for me, it's been pretty consistent.
Okay.
I kind of had a self-induced kind of pause when I moved to Hawaii.
Okay.
So in 2019, I was living in Honolulu, and
beautiful place.
It is.
Just came back from a week there myself. You can see the tan.
You look local.
Yeah.
I'm imagining you're Pinoy. Or
no, I'm actually Vietnamese.
Okay. But you look Pinoy because you got some color.
Yeah. And in Hawaii, I blend in very well.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, nobody knows I'm a tourist.
And that's how I think I got the job in Hawaii, is because I think people, when I interviewed, it wasn't like, oh, he's Haole, so it's like I can pass for a local.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons why I actually got the job. Was like, I could pass for local. We might as well bring him in. So yeah, when I moved there, I mean, I have friends like
Miko,
who's also goes by Sound Sex, who's Kyoki's little brother. He does a club there every Wednesday called Centered, and there's also Asylum, which was the big after hours, but that was no longer happening right now because of COVID. But that was like the go-to spot as well. So I was able to kind of I had connections because I've been DJing in Hawaii for the past 20 years. So when I moved there, I had connections, but it's not like Los Angeles where it's kind of just, there's so many things going on. So
right.
It turned from like DJing every weekend to DJing once or twice a month, which was good at that time. It was good to step away from it a bit, and it allowed me to miss LA, which I think I needed, because I think it's easy to take some of these things for granted. It's just like, it's a constant. So it's you don't really sometimes appreciate what you have until it's gone. Right.
Right.
So by putting myself on an island, literally, I was able to kind of step away from things, and it helped me in my perspective of things, because now it's like every time I spin it, it's like, especially now with the COVID shit, it's kind of even more so, like every opportunity I get to DJ, it's like, I don't know, it's maybe my last time.
Right.
I better enjoy the hell out of it. So now I find a lot more purpose in my DJing, because it really, I've as much as I could put it away and leave it on a shelf, what I realize is how much it's important to me. And while I know I don't need it, I absolutely love it. And it feeds a part of my soul that nothing else does. And so I really I think I found a newfound love because of moving, and then because of the lockdowns. And now that hopefully things start to continue to improve as far as the spread, although it doesn't look like it right now. But what I'm hoping is that we just I can continue to appreciate the moments that I have that involve DJing.
Right. So I guess I think everyone, and I am a bedroom DJ who gets to play out maybe once or twice a year.
Nice.
Yeah, shout out to Denon. really love the platform, the SC6000s, thumbs up.
I want the Go.
The Go is really awesome too. Yeah, the Prime Go.
I'm telling I have reps at Pioneer. I'm like, dude, you guys got to do something.
Yeah.
I would love a battery powered with a hard drive that I can take on the go.
Yeah, that's Wi-Fi enabled and can stream directly from Beatport and all of that. So again, shout out to Denon for your awesome functionality. But I meant to ask, I think everyone has their own kind of personal experience about what resonates to them about DJing. So I guess what for you has drawn you back for, these 30 years? What is it about it that, you're passionate about?
I was talking to Dan about this yesterday, actually, because, no, this was never supposed to be a career. This was never supposed to be a job, right? When I first started, I was 13.
Wow.
So that's in 1986. And, when I first started, I was just, DJing because I thought it looked like something I wanted to do. Where I grew up, I was born in Hollywood, but I went to junior high and high school in West Covina.
Okay.
And in the part of San Gabriel Valley that I lived in, there was a lot of party crews, a lot of DJ crews. And there's DJs all over the place, like around the corner, across the street.
So this is already in the 80s? This was already happening?
There was tons of DJs.
Okay. And then was it rave or was it a different beast?
This is all backyard party scene.
Okay.
So this is all pre-rave stuff.
Got it.
When I first started DJing, I was DJing mainly freestyle and hip-hop.
Got it.
And
so this is kind of like the Dr. Dre kind of
we used to go down to Slauson Swap Meet and Rodeo Swap Meet and pick up Dr. Dre mixtapes back in the day.
Right.
So that, yes, it's really kind of that genesis of where there wasn't really a rave scene. The rave scene in LA kind of started around 88, 89.
Okay.
But there was a lot of backyard parties, a lot of the party crew stuff. And so I kind of just got involved in that. Had my own little DJ crew type thing. But I think to answer your question as far as what keeps me passionate about this is that it's always evolving. Where I started when I was 13 and now that I'm 47, it's like miles apart. It's like from the technology standpoint, from the music standpoint, throughout my career, I've changed genres quite a bit. Probably when you first saw me, I was probably playing trance.
Yeah, like progressive trance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, the artists that I respect, that I, really are drawn to, are people that are chameleons, that change a lot. Bowie, Prince, The Cure. There's lots of different stylistic changes throughout their artistry, and I've always liked that. I like being able to just try different things and see how it goes. And I think DJing allows that because you can go off tangent and not play by the rules and see how far you can take people. I have a friend from high school who came to last night to the club in Santa Barbara. And this is the first time he's ever, like, he knew I was a DJ in high school, but this is the first time he actually has seen me DJ.
Wow.
And he's the one who got me into, like, goth music and punk. And, you know, I love a lot of different music. And, you know, I associate that to all the different kind of friends I had in high school, especially. But yeah, he really kind of turned me on to like bands like Sisters of Mercy and Fields of Nephilim and all this stuff that's, you know, I love. I absolutely love this music. And so and even though I know, you know, the whole house thing isn't his scene, after I was done, we were talking and he's like, "You're really talented." And I'm like, "Thanks, I appreciate that." He's like, I kept wondering, what are you doing up there? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just having a good time. And hopefully that resonates to people out there dancing, that if I'm enjoying myself, then you should be too. So, but what caught me was like, he saw the kind of puppetry that a DJ can have. He's like, yeah, you kind of pulled them into different directions.
Oh, in terms of over the crowd. Right. Yeah, it's like you're a shaman.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's, you know, I like the ability to just like, I always wanted to just like see how far I can go and without them stopping, right? Because sometimes you'll throw something down and you just like you lose the crowd and you're like, ugh. But there's other times where you drop something that's unexpected and the place explodes and you're like, I didn't expect that. That's cool. Those are the moments I live for. And as long as I still continue to have those kind of moments, I'm good.
Now, are there moments associated with particular records that you can remember?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. It's like, what are some of like the career highlights that you can remember?
You know, it's funny. I first heard Skydive by Freefall.
Yes. Jan Johnston. Yep.
So I got that as a promo. I was belonging to a record pool, and I remember it was like 98. And I heard that song for the first time, and it was just captured me. I was like, wow, this is a really good song. It's not just a dance song. It's just a good song.
Yeah.
And that didn't leave my crate for years.
Wow. Okay.
Years. And it's still, I mean, I'll still drop that song if it goes in that direction. No problem.
Are you familiar with a project called Trance Wax from a producer named Ajeka?
No.
So he's a newish producer, and he actually has this moniker, I guess an alias called Trance Wax, where he's remixing classic trance tracks. He has an essential mix from maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago where it's 2 hours of just his reworks of these classic trance songs. But one of his remixes is a trance breaks remix of Skydive.
Nice.
Amazing. You can only find it on vinyl. I was able to find like a bootleg somewhere, so happy to share it with you when we're done. But it's amazing. I actually dropped it. I play at one party a year, basically. I'm friends with this crew that throw an outdoor party kind of in the middle of nowhere once a year for maybe 40 people. And I got to play that track one time. So speaking of Skydive, and I definitely had that moment. So
no, it's a classic. You know, anybody who especially was raving when that song came out, and like, I mean, it was a go-to song for me. I know I pretty much played it every set I had. I was dropping that song because it was just a great track. Yeah, that one in particular. Now, I mean, other tracks that so it's funny because I still there's a couple of remixes from Hot Since '82 that came out in 2011 that I still play.
Right.
You know, and it's funny because there's this, when you watch reruns, I remember on NBC, they used to, you know, when they go into rerun season, and it would be like, if you haven't seen this before, it's new to you. So I'm like, that's what I feel like when I'm DJing. It's like, if I pull something out that's like 10 years old, if you never heard it before, it's still new to you.
That's true. There's always, probably the majority of people,
right,
you know, it'll be new to them.
Right.
It's not bigger than Prince, is it? Or
no, but I did just drop that pretty recently too. That's a great track. I forget which. I think it's a. It's like I've been dropping "Like You," which came out in 2011, one of his tracks, and some of his remixes. But I just like that production style, and to me, I'm not so caught up in like a lot of DJs get caught up in they have to play the newest thing.
Right.
It's like I have to play whatever is brand new. I think when you become kind of an older DJ and you have a lot of history behind you, it's fun to go back and bring stuff out that hasn't, you haven't played, before or haven't played in a while. A recent set I did over in Orange County in May for the Insomniac OG crew. I started off with house. I morphed into old school techno, and then just kept writing it. And that to me is fun. Is just being able to especially the longer set you have, where you can kind of just go through genres and just kind of just play things out and see what happens. Because I've never planned sets. I don't practice much, and I don't really see what goes together until I'm doing it. So
Okay.
I really just download tracks from Beatport or TrackSource or wherever, and I play out. And that's when I first hear the song. Is pretty much the same time anyone who's on the floor is listening to it as well.
Wow. Okay. So you're kind of going on the fly no matter what, with very little preparation.
Absolutely. I mean, even in the vinyl days, like I said, I belong to a record pool, and I used to get these big boxes of promos. And what I would do is I was a resident at Magic Wednesdays at the time in Hollywood, and I would just take the box, open the box, and try things out.
Wow.
That was fun. It's like, let's see what this sounds like.
Right.
And you get to know artists, and you get to know labels, of course, and you figure they have a similar sound throughout their production, so you just kind of go off of that. But yeah, I think it's. I know part of me is like, yes, there's a mastery in DJing where you're so tied to the genre and the artist that you spin that you kind of can create that magic because you are so in tuned to the music you've collected. And there's also the other side of that, which is me, which is I'm going to just try things out and see how it works.
Right.
And if it's great, cool. If it isn't, then you learn. So that's how I've kind of approached it.
Right. And I feel like that having seen you play, on many occasions, I feel like that definitely comes through in terms of kind of there is a funness to hearing you play. Like it is evident that you're having fun, and it is evident that, you're trying different things, cool. Which has always been really cool. And I guess taking a step back, back to West Covina yes. in the 80s, I guess could you kind of paint the picture of, the progression into rave, and what was the sure. scene like? How did it evolve from backyard, parties to warehouses? Like, sure. How did that whole progression take place?
So, DJing as a teenager, and I started, because I was going to record stores, and I would hear techno, but I've never been to a rave, but I was listening to techno music, and I was like, this is really cool stuff. And then, I heard, I was ditching school and going to Melrose and Hollywood Boulevard to go to record shopping when I was, senior in high school. And I would go down to Melrose and walk into DMC. And I was so caught off guard by walking into these, where it's just stacks and stacks and stacks of, techno music. As opposed to the record stores where I was, it was maybe a little bit of techno, and then you had mainly hip hop or pop or whatever.
So this was the beginnings of kind of the old school house and techno record shop, yes. like Groove Rider.
Yes, yeah. So back in the day, it was DMC, Street Sounds, and then Beat Non-Stop, Prime Cuts.
Actually, I remember DMC. I've definitely bought a few things from there back in the day.
DMC was the go-to spot. Basically what we would do is go down on the weekends, and we'll start at DMC, and then a few blocks down the Street Sounds. And if you, so inclined, you can walk all the way back down Melrose to get to Beat Non-Stop. And Beat Non-Stop had a clothing store there, so we'd buy some clothes and stuff. But no, that was the whole scene. And then it was you would see DJ Dan, you see Barry Weaver, and because Barry worked at one of the stores, Ron was working at DMC. So it's all of the rave scene was kind of associated with Melrose at that time.
Got it. So these record shops, I guess rave had already begun to become a scene if there are already record shops that existed to service it.
I think the music was one thing. It creating a scene is an entirely different thing. Because the music, started in Detroit and then became like everything, rock and roll, same thing. Started in the U.S., goes to
the
Britain,
UK, yeah.
And, things happen. And the Summer of Love for the UK was 1988. And that was, because of Acid House. So
so that was like when Oakenfold and Danny Rampling went to Ibiza.
That whole story, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Brought back a bunch of E.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was the kind of the genesis of that rave scene in the UK. A lot of people don't know how it kind of came back to America. So the rave scene started in Los Angeles in the U.S.
Okay, I did not know that. Yes, please give us the history lesson.
So Steve, who goes by Mr. Kool-Aid, Steve and Ron DeCor were, they've known each other since like grade school. Steve went to the UK to go to art school, and this was so happens to be summer of '88 kind of thing.
What I'm sorry, and Steven is
Mr. Kool-Aid.
Okay.
So he ends up going to these underground acid house parties. I believe his parents find out that he's not going to school and he's partying instead, so they bring him back to California, where he decides to start throwing these parties. And that's how really the rave scene started, is because of Steve experiencing these things in the UK and then bringing it back to California. And back then, there weren't a lot of DJs, so all the people who were involved really ended up becoming the DJs.
Right.
Yeah. So, because they were the ones buying the records and they were the ones who were collecting it, so by default, they kind of became the DJs. And really, that was how things started. They started renting out warehouses or breaking into warehouses. So Steve, he was doing stuff under the name Double Hit Mickey. So him and his partner, which is Gary Destructo.
Wow.
Yeah. So Gary's been around forever too. They were the ones who kind of started, Double Hit Mickey and all these clubs, and the first Electric Daisy Carnival before Pasquale took the name. So it's really Steve, and I would highly suggest you if he's open to being interviewed about the genesis of this, because he really is kind of the reason why the scene kind of happened the way it happened.
Wow, yeah. 'Cause I feel like when you read about rave, it's all focused on the UK and how they created it, and then somehow it ended up back here, but there's very little detail in terms of.
There's a lot of I don't want to say misinformation, a lot of different versions of the story,
right?
And then because Bones, who was Frankie Bones out of New York, who was producing a lot in the '80s as well, and did get booked to play shows out in the UK, but really he brought that back to New York and started doing storm raves, and him and his brother Adam X and Heather Hart, they started the East Coast stuff. But yeah, for the West Coast, it was really around Steve.
Okay, and then was this the late '80s? You said?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you're the teenager at this time.
Yes, and I had no idea what was going on in Hollywood, other than the fact that I was buying records. So, at some point, I went to this warehouse party, and this was like December of '91, but it still wasn't like a full-on rave. It was more like a bunch of teenagers who got into like a storage unit and threw a party.
Okay.
Kind of mimicking rave. So then what ended up happening was it's like February of '92, and I had my DJ stuff in my garage, and a bunch of friends and I went out and went to Melrose, and back in the day it was all flyers, so you just pick up a bunch of flyers, and when you go record shopping, we went back to my house, we were playing our records in the garage, and just hearing them out loud, and I talked to one of my friends, Mark, and I'm like, we should go to a rave tonight. Yeah, why not? All right, let's do it.
So at this point, this is something you had kind of heard of. You'd been
I knew
exposed to the music.
I knew there were parties. I mean, because we would pick up the flyers, so I knew there was parties going on. But yeah, it was all of a sudden we're just like, let's just see what this is about. So we went to Hollywood, went to the Map Point, bought our tickets, went on a whole adventure.
The Map Point, yes. Very old school.
We had to go to Map Point to buy the ticket, then got directions to a limousine that was parked outside of the pantry in downtown. Yeah. Knock on the window. They give you another set of directions. And it basically said, you're going to a Madonna video release party.
That was the cover?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was always, something. So we climbed back in the car. We ended up at the Casa. And the Casa is located on Washington and Oak in downtown LA. And I walk in and I was like, wow, this is like the best thing ever. And I was like, I've never seen the DJ placed front and center on a stage.
Right.
All eyes on them.
What was the production like? Was there visuals, lasers?
Yeah, I mean, so it was at the Casa. So Casa has, wooden floors, stage area. And I remember this is one of my distinct memories of that night, there was laser lights. And the lasers were, Ron and Dan were on at that time. And it would say Ron Decor and DJ Dan. And I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know who Ron is. I don't know who Dan is.
Wait, so DJ Dan played at the very first event that you've ever been to?
Absolutely.
And then you just played with him last night.
Yes. So a very long history with Dan. And I remember this guy was on stage and he was throwing out lollipops to the crowd. And I was like, that's interesting. And so what I decided after that night, we didn't get home morning. We didn't get home till like 6 a.m. And all of us were like, we got to do this again next weekend. We got to do this again. And so we were kind of hooked. And from that moment on, I was pretty much going out every weekend.
Okay.
And I decided, I want to see if I can DJ one of these. I was all in. I wanted to do this. So what I did, because there wasn't emails or websites, or it was all voicemails. So I would call up with the voicemails from my work, and I had my little tape machine, and I would play a little bit of my tape, especially with me scratching, because not a lot of people were doing that in the rave scene. So I'd call all the voicemails, and I'm like, hey, I'm a new DJ. My name's Theo, and here's a little bit of my mix. And I played my mix over the voicemails. I mean, I didn't know if any of this was going to work, but,
You're making use of the technology that was available to you at the time.
At the time, yes. So one night, and this is like late February or early March of 92, my mom's like, it's for you. And I pick it up, and it was the guy who was throwing out the candy. And his name is Coco, and he used to go by the name The Candy Man.
Okay.
And Coco was like, hey, I heard your mix on the voicemail. And he's like, it sounds really good. I'm like, thanks, man. He's like, would you like to open our event? What? Yeah. You want to play? I'm like, hell yeah. And so that sparked a friendship with Coco and I, and we've known each other, 30 years or so now, too. And he was responsible for my first gig. And that was in March of 1992. So I've only been starting to go to raves in February. I already had my first gig in March. So it was pretty... And
but you already knew how to DJ, so you had the beat matching down and everything.
I was DJing,
Right.
And to me, honestly, the caliber of DJs that were from... Because back in the day, there was like the East Side and the West Side. Okay? And all the raves, the normal raves, were considered West Side events.
Okay.
If you look into a copy of an old Herb magazine from the early 90s, you'll see coverage for East Side events and West Side events. East Side events, they were mainly Latin.
Okay.
There was a big crew called Latin Underground.
But these were Latin raves?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And a lot of times they merged. Like there would be a West Side flyer and there'd be an East Side flyer, both catering to two different audiences.
Same event.
But the same event.
Interesting.
Yeah, it happened all the time. And, you know, the caliber of DJs on the East Side was because it was based in hip hop and freestyle and a lot more interaction with the turntables than just playing tracks. So I felt the caliber of the DJs that were part of that scene were a lot better than the caliber of DJs that were on. You know, nothing against them, and I think for what they did, at the time, you know, I think they all became better DJs as time progressed. But when I was first going to raves, I mean, I loved the music, but I was not really impressed by a lot of the DJs.
Okay. In terms of like the mixing was poor, the beat matching was bad. Okay.
Yes. It just seemed like that skill wasn't set yet.
Right. And it was, I guess it was a nascent time, right? So like,
well, yeah, I mean, it's brand new. Everyone's, you know, you're learning how to DJ as you're playing gigs, you know? So it was definitely, you know, and that's what impressed me so much about Dan is Dan was like out of the gate, like, damn, he was good. And he even back then he was scratching a little bit and doing stuff. The one other DJ at that time that I was like really struck by was probably Barry Weaver. He from a pure mixing standpoint was just like wow. And there's Tony Largo. And there were a lot of good DJs. Even Tony Largo was an East Side DJ. He was a Latin DJ. He played in party crews back in the day. So to me, there was like this different level of DJing on both sides. And so what I was trying to do is just, I really didn't belong in anything, you know. And that's what I loved about the rave scene. The rave scene is like, we don't care what color you are, what you're about. Just go in and have a good time and dance.
Right.
So that really appealed to me. So.
And what was the sound? Was it, because this was before trance, so this is still kind of the acid house era.
I mean, the breakbeat old school techno.
Okay.
And, you know, what was considered like hardcore back in the day.
Okay.
You know? So stuff like, you know, early Prodigy, you know,
got it.
Dominator, you know, the early Joey Beltram stuff. So yeah, I mean, if you listen to any like 91, 92 era of rave music, I mean, that's pretty much what's playing at every rave.
Got it. So you're like Energy Flash showing up.
Yes, okay. Absolutely. Great track.
Indeed.
But yeah, I was really inspired by what I saw, and I wanted to contribute to it as much as possible. And luckily for me, I was able to, you know, there weren't a ton of DJs, and not like back in the day, or like not like now, where the cost of entry to become a DJ is you buy a laptop.
Right.
That's it. The cost of entry for DJing when I first started,
you need the turntables, the mixer, the vinyl, the crate for the vinyl. It
was a commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it just, well, you steal the crates. You just go to behind the grocery store and pick up milk crates.
Right.
But, you know, I think there was a level of dedication in being a DJ at that time because it required you to do so much to become a DJ. Mm-hmm. Now it's a lot easier. The point of entrance is a lot lower than what it used to be. Yeah.
Though on that note, I think because the technical bar is so much lower these days, I think now you have to be a producer to be
you have to do something that's well, and unfortunately that's where the masks come in and the costumes and all of that stuff. That's because you have to do something more than the music in order to stand out these days. And that's, you know, that's good and bad. I think that's great that it's become, you know, you have to set the bar higher in other ways. But it purely isn't about talent like it used to be.
Right. You know, it's marketability. And I think in that, and I think it's a great thing, you know, more people DJing, awesome.
Yes.
But I think to your point, I think there's something been lost in terms of the journey. Yeah. I think a lot of the younger DJs that I see these days, they're just sort of slamming tracks but there's kind of no cohesion to it, because, you know, they're also focused on making beats on their computer. And it's sort of, I think in order to like really be dialed into how to move a dance floor, like you really just need to be focused on that. Which I think is something that you've been doing very well, you know, for many decades.
I think the art of mixing isn't as important as the theatrics, unfortunately.
Right.
You know, because there used to be a point in time where you pull off a 2.5 minute mix where it just sounds impeccable. And when you're done with that, the track, people are like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Because they get it. You know, now that's lost. You know, I could hold down a 3-minute mix and no one's going to care.
Yeah. You can hit play on both tracks at the same time, like in sync on Tractor or something, and just let it run.
You can loop it on one side and just, you know. But the nice thing about technology and what it's, because I love vinyl. I buy vinyl all the time. I probably spend way too much money on vinyl. But it's mainly for stuff I listen to, not because I'm DJing with it. But, you know, the limitations of vinyl DJing is the limitations. You can do a lot of cool and creative stuff with it. Obviously, scratching became a part of this, right? But, you know, with technology, the looping, the effects, all of those things, you know, you can be really creative with that stuff. So I don't care about the medium. I don't care if you're a vinyl DJ or digital DJ. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, you have a job. Job is to make people dance. You know, when I started DJing, I went to raves because I wanted to hear music I could not hear anywhere else. That was a huge thing to me. Because I knew when I went to a rave, I'm not going to hear this stuff on the radio. I'm not going to hear this stuff. This is where I need to go in order to hear this. That's lost now. And that's unfortunate. Because now it's about you want to hear your favorite song. Now, especially with trance, and I love trance music, but it turns into sing-alongs.
Right. I mean, I think it depends on the party, right? I think there's certainly many parties you can still find these days where it is about kind of pushing the music forward. But
I think a lot of the psytrance stuff, definitely. I think there's, you know, I started playing Goa and Psy in like 95, 96.
Oh, wow.
And back then, it was like really hard to come by. You couldn't find a ton of it. And I didn't know this at the time because I'm just used to DJing and matching beats and making a cohesive dance floor that in Goa, they don't mix. What?
I did not know this.
Oh, you didn't know? So apparently because in Goa, India, which Goa is on the coast, it's a Portuguese settlement that became kind of a hippie town.
Right. I remember it's famous for its Goa trance.
Yes. So the Goa scene, because of the heat, did not play vinyl typically. They played DATs. So there wasn't a lot of mixing. So when I started DJing, I just DJed but I noticed the intro, the intros and the outros of psytrance or Goa trance, it wasn't cohesive or wasn't conductive of mixing. It was mainly about playing the track and then starting a new one. But I still mixed it anyway, and I got a lot of heat from people who were like true Goa heads.
Oh, you're not doing it the way they do it in Goa, bro.
Yeah. That's not how we do things in Israel, bro. I'm like, I'm not in Israel. So that's the fun part of this, is that you get to explore music. And I think with psytrance, there's still artists out there that are doing really unique things. I love good trance music. I love the classics because that's what what helped make my name was, a certain sound. I started buying trance in like 93 when IQ Records and Hard House were coming out from Germany. And there's also Platypus from the UK.
Yes, so good. Love that label.
Yeah, I remember I bought the first Platypus release. It's an Art of Trance track, and that changed that track changed where I went with my DJing.
Art of Trance has some new releases like recently. Have you heard?
I haven't, but I would be interested in checking them out because I've always loved pretty much anything that Platypus put out.
Yeah, still putting out really good stuff, and they have a new aesthetic with like very trippy art, like super cool.
Nice.
So I guess, yeah, what was it like kind of coming up when these new sounds? I mean, I guess I can comp it to today when, you know, you're hearing new stuff, but I have to imagine that back then, you know, when trance first came to the scene, it must have been kind of special in terms of, I've never heard anything like this before.
There was a point in time in like the 92 where things started to branch out, and I was playing a lot of kind of breakbeat driven techno music, which would eventually turn into drum and bass and jungle. So I could have easily went down that road because I love drum and bass music, and I like to mix it because it's a lot of fun. But you know, I started hearing trance, and I was really caught up in the melodies, like Energy 50.
Cafe Del Mar.
Cafe Del Mar,
yeah.
Energy 52. When I first heard that, I was like, because this didn't sound to me like anything else I was playing at the time. So I was like, and when you hear those new sounds, you're just like, what is that? And how can I incorporate it into what I'm doing? And then eventually you start following a genre that wasn't a genre before, and all of a sudden now it is. And now it becomes something, and you're just, and then you, and then like Germany had a style of hard trance. And there's a label called Frankfurt Beat, which was really good, hard, melodic trance. And when you start going down those paths and just finding out, you know, where it takes you is just. But that's the bad part of me is I get bored. I can't be this person who's like dedicated to a genre.
Right.
I think those people who are awesome. I wish I could do it. I can't. There's too much good music out there for me to be like, I'm all about house and I'm all about this. I'm all about good music. What I've hope is that even though my genres or my style has changed over the years, that a Theo set still sounds like a Theo set no matter what I do. That's my goal, is that regardless of what style I'm playing, that you're like, oh, it's good. And that's, to me, as a DJ, that's ultimately what you want, is to be a tastemaker, is someone who's going to not just play what you like, but play the song that you didn't know was going to be your favorite song until you heard it.
Right. I mean, I was telling you, I was listening to one of your SoundCloud sets before you got here, and you know, I haven't heard you play in a while now, and I was like, oh yeah, this still feels like what I remember. Right. Like the tunes are different, right? It's like the music has changed; it's much cleaner and digital now. Right.
More compressed.
Yeah, but I was like, oh yeah. You know, one DJ who I feel like has been really good at that, you know, over the years is John Digweed, who every time he comes up, all hail. But I remember, I remember in like 2006, he kind of made a progression from kind of progressive house to more like minimal techno.
Yeah.
And that was when he kind of rebranded his show to be called Transitions, to kind of indicate that it was a movement in a different direction. And yet it still sounded Digweed. It's like, oh yeah, this is totally different, but the same. Right. And yeah, so I think it is kind of a mark of a true DJ where you have kind of created your sound in such a way that there's a vibe. You have a vibe, and even though the music changes, that vibe still exists.
Yeah, and I think that's what ultimately, you know, what Digweed is doing, and a lot of, you know, old school DJs. You know, you listen to Carl Cox, right? It's like, yes, he's known for a particular sound, but he's also played trance. He also played hardcore. He also played tech.
Yeah.
So he's like, you know, I was listening to a drum and bass set of Carl Cox. No, not the one that was actually
the one the Theta Burn set.
That's comedy. But I was listening to a drum and bass set, and I was like, this is Carl Cox playing drum and bass. It's awesome. You know?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Yes. You know, I love that when DJs can branch out and do stuff that, you know, you're not entirely expecting them to do, or they surprise you, or like, well, why are we going in this direction? But you still, because that DJ's been around a long time and he has a history, and you know that he has a good track record, that DJs that can have some liberty to take you onto places that you may not want to go with other DJs. So I think that's once you have that history and that longevity, that you can play around a bit more, and people will still follow you because
100%.
they know you're going to bring something good.
It's like Digweed or even you can show up with a track that might be a little off the beaten path, and people will still stay with you, and you have that leeway because people sort of trust your curation. Whereas like if I had a gig, as mainly a bedroom DJ, I probably would not be able to get away with some kind of these out there tracks.
But
definitely
I implore
agree.
you to try. I played at Space Taco 2 weeks ago, which is a club in Pomona, and it mainly caters to a younger audience. So, I'm trying to think about not just the what I want to play, but also think about what in the audience is, right? If I know I'm playing for a bunch of older heads that have been in the scene for a while, then I can go certain places with them. If I'm playing for a younger crowd, then I'm gonna cater to that a little bit. But what I liked about it was like I went all over the place. I played bass house, I played tech house, I played vocal house, I played two step. I was all over the damn place, and they went on the ride with me, and that's what I love. It's just like I was dropping things. I was like, I don't even know if this is going to work. Let's try it out. That's fun. And I love that these people, have the open mind to kind of just go with it. And that's the whole thing. My motto has always been, even since the '90s, open ears, open mind. You shouldn't be focused on just a genre, or it's just. If you're open to trying new things and musically, then allow the DJ to take you on a journey wherever that goes. And sometimes it may not be the best journey for you. Sometimes you're going to end up in a place where you're like, wow, I didn't even know I like this kind of music.
Right. So a couple threads I wanted to follow up on here. So I guess first thing, in terms of being at kind of the ground zero of rave in Southern California and kind of growing with that. I guess how did you kind of carve this niche for yourself in terms of like true like underground warehouse raves? Because I feel like
No one else would book me.
Because I feel like that's like your
my niche.
Yeah.
Partially because no one else would book me. What ended up happening is that
But you're such a known entity in Southern California. I guess I'd have trouble believing that.
There's a difference between, art and product, right? So, at some point in my career, I was talking with Dan about this. When we started, there was no career. There was no PR person who's like, I'm going to make you a star kind of thing. It was just a bunch of kids playing in warehouses to each other.
Right.
And it turned, and I was telling Dan, I was like, it turned into an industry around us. The fact is that, EDC, pulls 100,000 kids. That's crazy. Did I ever think that would happen? No. Not where I came from.
Right. Or even today, like, $1 million residencies in Vegas.
Right. Yeah. That's incredible. For me, I was fortunate enough to live off of DJing for 4 years and just live off my art in my 20s. And just to have that experience in and of itself, to be able to say I lived off music, no matter how long it was, that's awesome. I look at Dan, I look at Doc, and I'm like, these people are still living off of this, from when they were in their 20s.
Right.
And now they're in their 50s. That's crazy.
Yeah. I saw Dan play at Burning Man in 2019.
Yeah.
You're still kicking.
Yeah. That's the fact that they can still do this, and that, we get to a certain age and now we're legends or whatever the term is. For me, I'm blessed. I'm grateful. I'm grateful I don't live off it, because if I did, it would probably turn it into something I hate rather than something I love. What ended up happening for me was, because of, living off it, I had to take gigs I didn't necessarily want to do because I have to pay my bills, or play certain styles that I really didn't want to push anymore. Oh, we want you to play trance. Well, I'm in a different place now, but you want to get paid. You want to take care of your bills. So now, my mindset's a bit different than a lot of other people in regards to, I'm not looking to be the next big DJ or anything like that. So to me, it doesn't matter. And I'm just happy that I'm still a part of this. So
Right.
The fact that I still get booked is cool with me. But to your point, or to your question, originally, none of us knew this was going to turn into this. So we weren't prepared for it to become a career. So, once it started becoming more of a product rather than art, then how do you sell yourself? What does that look like? There was a old Accelerator magazine that had this whole, like, the future of trans, and it had Sandra Collins, Christopher Lawrence, and I believe maybe it was DJ Daniel from Moon Tribe. I don't remember, but
it's like a bunch of attractive white people.
And I even told my girlfriend, now wife at the time, I was like, if I was white and thin, I'd be huge. And I hate to put it that way, but those are the realities of when you're looking to brand something. You wanted to make it appealing. You wanted to make it, and I don't mean to disparage, Christopher Lawrence or Sandra Collins, because they're wonderful people and they're great DJs. But I think it's harder when you don't fit that mold of what's sellable.
Right. Especially then too, right? Because, rave was happening, but this was also a time where in pop music, kind of writ large, right? This was Britney Spears, right. Yeah. Backstreet Boys. So yeah, I guess the Hollywood music complex kind of already had an idea of what it wanted its people to look like.
And I was told to do certain things in order to get better bookings. I was told, like, change my name. That was a big one.
Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Wait, Theo was objectionable?
It was at a time where, when trans changed his real name to Jason Blakemore. Other DJs were doing the same thing, and I toyed around with using my first and middle name, which is Jacob Andrew, as maybe doing house music under that.
Oh yeah, because that was the thing. Everyone was their first and middle name.
Right. And because I was told Theo is associated with the rave scene. And if I want to do clubs, if I want to do Giant and Spun Day and do raise my caliber as a DJ, then I had needed to stop doing the kiddie rave stuff. And I read this interview with Michael Caine, and it struck me. Michael Caine is a wonderful actor, right? Has done tons of movies, but he's also done a lot of questionable roles. And they've asked him, so why do you do that? He's like, honestly, because I never know when my next paycheck is coming, so I do everything I can. And that's the kind of approach I took to it. And plus, I enjoy DJing.
Right.
I didn't want to say no to things just because it might help me later.
Right.
And there's no certainty in that. So luckily for me, I stuck with my guns on that and stayed Theo, and it didn't really matter. And now it's just like, because I looked at people like Doc. Doc Martin the name is tied to a shoe, But now you think of Doc Martin, you think, Yeah,
you just as easily think of him as you do the shoe. It's like...
Right. And you look at, Frankie Bones. It's like, these aren't people's real names, but, it's their artist name. And it doesn't matter, it got to the point where I was, I was getting it was ridiculous to try to meet the demands of trying to become something that I wasn't. And ultimately, do you want to sell your soul, for this?
Right. Man, that's really fascinating, though, because I remember bearing witness to all of that. Be like, oh, why do all the DJs have like kind of the same kind of name? Everyone's like a blonde dude with frosted tips. Like there was very much like an aesthetic being pushed. And like even then, like I was not aware of the way it was being pushed. It was just like, oh, these this is who's DJing. Like, you just think that this is who the
Right.
players are without sort of understanding that behind the scenes there's curation taking place.
That's when it becomes the product. And there's nothing wrong with product because everyone uses products, but it's not the same as art.
Right.
So, and I don't want to say that I'm better than anyone, or I'm just different, and I
Right.
do things the way I want to do things, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Singular.
That's a good word. I'm just at the very end of this, when it all is said and done. A, I never thought it would get this far. B, I'm glad I did things the way I wanted to do.
So I guess these days, like, how are your bookings coming? Do you have a manager?
I do.
Okay.
His name is Tony Trujillo, and he does, help me out with stuff. I've had various managers over my career, some better than others. Even Sasha's sister, Cian, she was a booking agent at a time. And
Oh, wow, I didn't even know that.
Some bookings for me. She's now a realtor in D.C. area.
Okay.
But everyone, it was good and bad in their own different ways. The way I always looked at it is no one's going to care more about my career than me.
Right.
And I'm at this point, I was talking to, Tony, who's helping me out, because he's also handling younger artists and who are trying to grow their careers. And I told him, I said, you can't treat me the same way you treat your other artists, because they may want to pursue things that I don't really care anymore. For me, I know I'm fully aware in the fact that I have less gigs in front of me than I do behind me. That's just part of getting older.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a function of age, right? Yeah.
And that's fine. So now instead of like, I want to be here in 10 years, or, I want to, I want to do this. And I'm so happy that I've had this experience to begin with, that anything else is just icing on an already sweet cake.
Right.
I don't have the need to become any more than what I am currently now.
Right. I mean, you're playing at least 1 or 2 gigs a week, it seems like, at least,
now,
non-COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the dream, right?
It is. Now I need to, find balance in it, because the balance is off. I live in Santa Barbara now, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from any point in Los Angeles. And I need to be mindful of that. So I'm trying to find more things to do in the Central Coast that I can start DJing at and becoming, helping whatever scene is there as much as possible. And then come to LA like twice a month. And that would be kind of where I can find balance. Just right now, it's I love it, and it's great because it's, we're starting to get some really fun stuff going. But at the same time, I also need to be mindful that I don't. It takes a lot out of me to come and just drive down here for
right.
Like people want me to do desert shows. I'm like, I'm gonna drive 4 hours for an hour gig, and that's just there. And I got 8 hours for an hour. So yeah,
right. It's rough.
Yeah, I mean, and I just the way one of the things that was told to me when I wanted to grow it, and was and I do understand the mentality of this is to do less and get more. So take less bookings but get better. Become more exclusive. So I'm kind of doing that actually because of the distance that I'm in now. So
you have to be more discriminating just by virtue of the fact that it's like a long drive.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm trying to be mindful. I also I'm not asking for a ton of money, but I do want I feel my time is valuable. So it's like, if you can meet these requirements, then cool. If not, it's okay. You can hire someone else, and I'm okay with that. I'm not, the hunger is there to DJ, absolutely, but not just because to DJ. It needs to make sense, and that's where I'm trying to approach things at, is just how do we have this make sense so that I can go down into LA and have a good time, but also at the same time not wear myself out or have it affect my day job or anything like that.
Right. So I guess Couple final questions.
Sure.
In terms of, you've carved this niche kind of in true warehouse raves. Is it weird kind of the fact that your crowd kind of stays the same age this whole time? Meaning like you've been DJing to multiple generations now of, 18 to 22-year-olds, as you've continued to kind of evolve. What has it been like kind of, seeing that happen before your eyes? And then I guess related question, what are your thoughts on kind of the state of EDM these days and kind of, the birth of like, because I don't think we could have ever imagined that electronic music would have taken the turn that it did, but also become as popular as it has.
It's the same audience in some respects. Now that is also this audience of people who were going to raves back when they were young and now are going out again.
Okay.
Maybe their kids are grown or whatever. So there's these events that kind of cater to the 40 and older,
multi-generational raving.
Yeah, and I think being at a party with a bunch of people your same age is kind of cool because you have a shared history kind of thing. Like when I played for Space Taco, who was definitely, weren't around when I started. This crowd was not there.
Right,
so, and I find that to be a good challenge for me because, how do you stay relevant? How do you keep with your own sound and how you like to do things, but also remain relevant to people who are not familiar with your history or familiar with dance music history?
Right.
So it's kind of like it's a challenge, and I like that. I like being able to challenge myself to say, okay, so how do I cater to them but still remain me? So that's where
So you don't have to show up and just throw like EDM bangers all night.
Right. And nor would I wouldn't want it. I mean, there's certain bass house stuff that I think is just, it's awesome. It's great stuff. It's fun. It's energetic. It reminds me of early rave stuff. But the full on, not to again disparage anyone, but I remember going to EDC and I had an epiphany. This is EDC 2018.
This is a Vegas EDC.
Vegas EDC. I played 2016 on one of the art cars and had a wonderful time. It was just like full on great time. I played in 2018 at this secret Camp OG spot that was in the kind of the vendor village. But it's funny because I ended up playing after all the other stages closed. So all of a sudden there was like 4,000 kids right in front of me because the music was still on in our area. And even though we only kept it on for like another 15, 20 minutes longer than the rest of the
They just showed up. They're like, oh,
all of a sudden
beats.
it's like, all right. But I had this epiphany. I was listening to Like Mike and Dimitri Vegas, and they were playing the main stage, and I absolutely hated what they were playing.
Understandable.
It was just horrible, but the crowd loved every second of it. And I never want to be the old dude at the rave saying, "Get off my lawn." So my epiphany was like, I don't like this music, but they love it. And that's awesome. And I'm not going to tell them that they should like something better. Maybe they should. Maybe they should go listen to, a Carl Cox set, or Doc Martin set or DJ Dan set. Maybe, but this is what they chose and this is what they enjoy. And that's awesome. Great for them. It's not for me, but I'm not their audience. They're not targeting me, the old crusty raver dude.
Right.
So, I'm trying to respect the EDM stuff and, realizing that, it is what it is and it's catered to. It's not my generation. And for me to just hold on to something and to say, you need to enjoy what I like because I'm old and you should recognize that.
Right.
It doesn't go that's not a good argument.
Right.
So I respect, even though I don't like it, I respect it enough to know that it's also feeding me to the point that people can
right. It's still in the ecosystem.
Yes.
Well, that's a really positive perspective over it, because I struggle with that a lot in terms of like, oh, I feel like this is garbage.
Like people talk shit on the festivals, it's not intimate. It's not, you can't catch that vibe. That's the point.
Yeah.
So, and there's a difference between going to a nice warehouse party with like 300 people or park party with like a couple hundred people and going to full on EDC something. There's differences, and you can't compare those things at all.
Right.
And what I hope is that a kid who goes to their first rave, like when I did when I was 18, that they just get that sense of wonderment, that they walk into another world and they're like, wow, I didn't even know this existed until like a month ago, and now I'm here and I love it. And if you love it, that's all we could ask for. And maybe you'll go down the road of understanding the history of the culture, and maybe you'll start, you'll know who, the Bellevue Three are, and understand where techno came from, and it's always if you are truly invested into a culture, you should learn its history. You should know what it's about.
Agree.
That should be important to you if you're going to be a part of this culture, or any culture, that you learn about it. And as an older person still in the culture, I shouldn't be dismissing you just because you're younger. I shouldn't be like, nah, you don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, they're carrying the torch, right? So, yeah, it is a difficult dynamic though, where it's like having to withhold the judgment, but also keeping in mind that like it's just a sign that as we like aging ravers or aging out, they're the ones carrying the torch.
Well, it's like, okay, now that you like this EDM stuff, let me show you Aphex Twin.
Yeah,
It's like, so that's how I want to approach things. Is like, oh, you like that? That's cool. What about this?
Yeah.
And that's how it usually happens with music. And, there's always someone older than you or more in tune to a culture than you who is going to turn you on to new things.
Right.
And that's all I hope, is that I can be that catalyst for someone else.
Right.
It's like, you may not like, oh, you like this electronic music? Let me introduce you to Kraftwerk.
I mean, but even outside of that, like even Insomniac, they know what the good shit is. Like that's why they have their Factory 93 label, right? And their Factory 9310. And they are, I mean, thankfully it does hearten me a lot to see that, I'll show up at a Factory 93 party and it'll be like, I'll feel like one of the older people there. I'm like, okay, it's good. Yeah. It's good. The kids are all right. Yeah. All right, man. Well,
it's popular for the 20-year-olds to get into techno.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
It's very weird how that's happened now.
It's the business techno, but that's okay.
True.
I'll take business techno over business EDM any day. Well, with that, we're coming up on time, but I could talk to you for 3-4 hours.
You got any questions you want to edit this? I got time.
No, but I do want to keep it an hour, but I think we should just bring you back on another occasion and talk about rave history.
One of the things you wanted to talk about was the whole daytime career or nighttime thing.
I know. Well, we'll have to table that, because I do feel like I could not have asked for a better chat today in terms of everything we've covered, and getting kind of a close eye view at the inception of rave here in Southern California. And man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, and
glad to be a part of the conversation.
And for folks who don't know, Theo drove like 2.5 hours to get here today from Santa Barbara. Good. So he did it for you guys.
Did it for the rave.
Yeah, did it for the plur. Awesome, man. Thank you again, and
Thank you, Nick.
Look forward to having you back.
Anytime.
Fantastic.